What's good? It's Woog. Someone hit me up asking the question, can Jake Paul really fight? Jake Paul, the famous YouTuber who just knocked NBA three-time slam dunk contest, Nate Robinson, out cold on the undercard of the Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones fight. And before we answer the question, I would definitely encourage everyone to tune in this Saturday to Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia. I understand that Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr., two legends from the 80s and the 90s, totaled over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Outstanding, incredible performance. Hats off to both legends. But if you want to truly see the cream of the crop and in terms of what is the absolute best that boxing has to offer today, Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia is one of those fights. So can Jake Paul really fight? Well, yeah, he can really fight. Jake Paul would whoop most people's behind. First of all, he's naturally a pretty good athlete. He's a big, strong dude. And the ironic thing is that, his image to a lot of the haters was just that of a super corny dude. And maybe that hasn't changed for many. But in terms of just the measurables, he's a fit dude. I don't know if he played any high school football, but he probably could have. You could tell by his boxing that his footwork is above average. And that's really the difference between him and Nate Robinson in this case. Jake Paul knew what he was doing, has been training. Nate Robinson did not know what he was doing. You did see flashes of hand speed from Nate Robinson when he did start throwing his left, but it was like he panicked. You could tell that with the height difference, Nate Robinson wasn't comfortable sitting at arm's length. Nate Robinson did not look comfortable at all. And, I had seen the Paul brothers fight on DAZN before. I saw the second fight between Jake's brother, Logan Paul, and KSI. KSI won by close decision. But then I saw Jake Paul fight, I believe also on DAZN, shortly after that, and totally obliterate his YouTube opponent. And that fight, which made Jake Paul look phenomenal, was against somebody who did not know what they were doing. They didn't seem to have the same level of physicality or the same level of experience. And Jake Paul is obviously training, and he's training pretty diligently. He said he hadn't been home in his $8 million Calabasas mansion for like periods of several months because he's dedicating himself to training. So it's like you could see the comfort in which he was able to stand. And the professionals make it look easy in terms of standing at arm's length and not looking concerned and just looking like you just roll out of bed and it's like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. Even the action of just shooting the jab or receiving a jab without looking like you're totally, panicking or feeling anxious and compelled to lunge in. Yeah! When the bullets start flying. I mean, these are all totally reasonable and natural responses to something as wild as fighting. So to see Jake Paul kind of, you see the fighters like, just move around and they look like fighters. And sometimes they're doing little subtle things like measuring distance, a lot of feinting, where you're not throwing the punch, but with your shoulders or your head or your hands, you're mimicking the motion of about to throw the punch to get a reaction to then find other openings. There are levels to boxing, and Jake Paul has seriously been putting in several hours to get comfortable to where you could look like you're swimming without drowning, basically. And Nate, from almost the opening bell, looked like he was not comfortable at distance. He was either way outside of the pocket or he was lunging in to where he's crossing his feet. Like, that's a big no-no. I mean, the fundamentals have to be addressed. And Jake Paul, again, has to address these fundamentals of footwork and foot spacing and how you move around the ring to stay balanced so that when you do get caught, you're not running into a punch. Nate Robinson, he collected his feet while he was charging at Jake Paul in some of these exchanges as if he was gathering his feet about to explode for a slam dunk. And it's just a total different skill set, footwork-wise, required to be able to thrive in a boxing environment. Jake Paul was there, Nate Robinson wasn't, and you saw the effects of that. I mean, seriously, you watch somebody's reaction who's not used to getting hands thrown at them, and as soon as they do, they freak the hell out. They try to clinch, and there are also different skills within clinching where if you don't know how to properly clinch, you do get caught up and put in a super vulnerable position. So these are all things that you learn so that you would avoid the danger zones. And Nate wasn't able to navigate those danger zones. And he got hurt early. That third knockdown was the third of 3 knockdowns. So they could have stopped the fight after the first knockdown. First of all, what was up with the count? Did you see the referee looking like a WWE referee, like counting the wrestler when he's outside of the ring? And you know that they're trying to avoid like having a count out be the determining decision on the fight. So the ref's like 1. And then he gets distracted by the other fighter. Finally gets to 2. Like the way that this ref, when these guys are really getting hit in the head, and these 10 counts are for safety related reasons, you see the ref like totally playing around with the count. He's like at 4. And then there's a few seconds between 4 and 5. It was unbelievable. But anyway, Nate Robinson eventually gets up. He's relegated once he gets up because he's so foggy, because he hasn't been faced with this traumatic of an experience in terms of like getting detached from your senses. I mean, MMA fans, do you recall when Daniel Cormier got head kicked in his rematch with John Jones? He cried around the time of the post-fight interview. And it wasn't like a sentimental cry. It was like the same reason why NFLer Luke Kuechly, it's spelled Kuechly, Luke Kuechly, former multi-time Pro Bowler, was crying when he got concussed on the field as he was getting carted off the field. Like concussion, getting rattled like that, it's a super traumatic experience. And so we're seeing Nate go through this in real time, and the ref basically gives him about 20 seconds to recover, and he's still like on 9. So this goes on another couple knockdowns. Nate's never able to regather his bearings, nor did he initially have the strategy or the know-how to be able to survive against somebody who, again, has been doing this for several months. Jake Paul, I mean, you see is in a lot of these sessions with Ryan Garcia, a legitimate fighter, one of the most promising young prospects in boxing. And so if you make the decision to get better and better and better, and you've got the initial skill set in terms of physicality, athleticism, coordination, dexterity, it's like, you see people with certain knacks. You could tell whether somebody was brought up like slap boxing back in the day, where you're just, you're moving in a way where you have a certain response to hands coming at you. So yeah, Nate was crossing his feet up on the entries. That's where you start getting ankles locked when you get hit and people go down with their legs tangled. So if you're going to fight Jake Paul, you better know what you're doing. You better have put in the work. Are there cases where raw athleticism might get you the W? Like they're talking about different NBA players perhaps fighting Jake Paul. David West, from what I understand, has some amateur boxing experience. So these things matter. If you're just going to come out there thinking that because you are 6'7" with the reach, that you're going to beat somebody who's been training and is about 6'2", you could get yourself hurt. And so, can Jake Paul fight? Well, he could probably whoop your ass. But yeah, he's got a pretty successful niche that he's built out here, as long as he doesn't get in there with another credible professional. Because you do this long enough, you are going to have to like navigate some pretty dark waters. And so if Jake Paul's next fight, for instance, was against somebody who doesn't have a name, somebody from, like Kazakhstan, who's a lower ranked professional boxer, but not like a top tenner, somebody who's like, win some, lose some. If he gets in with somebody like that, he will probably get put out, stopped in fairly short order. You do that long enough, and you're gonna meet your match. And then the question is, do you then continue and then fight again? And then maybe you beat somebody of a nearly equal stature to the guy that you just lost to. These are all the things that make up these professional fighters' records. And then the more you fight, the more credible your opponents become. So when you get to the level of like these Errol Spencers and Danny Garcias, every single fight is against an elite opponent or near elite opponent. So Jake Paul is developing into a formidable opponent. I don't think that he's going to turn pro and start trying to fight like 4 or 5 times a year. I think he's going to make a lot of money per fight, and select his opponents accordingly. I don't think he's going to be in there with the no-name Kazakhstani or some lesser-tiered fighter in even Robert Garcia's Oxnard camp, the breeding grounds of Mikey Garcia, Fernando Vargas, Brandon Rios, Victor Ortiz, and now the very exciting and promising Virgil Ortiz Jr. So I don't expect, nor would I recommend, Jake Paul to take on serious professionals. Get the right celebs to step up and shoot, watch them go down one by one if they don't know what they're doing. Again, unless you've got some Deontay Wilder-like gift where you can just put somebody to sleep with the first flush shot that you land, or supremely blessed with reflex ability, then there's usually a pretty steep learning curve to even get to the point that Jake Paul is in, where you can at least look comfortable, look the part, jab, jab, move, dip, dip, move, circle, jab, 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 right hand to the body. Start putting these patterns together, making them make sense, and then reacting accordingly when the other person launches an attack. Step to the side, protect yourself intelligently, counterpunch when the opportunity presents itself. There's a very legitimate learning curve to getting those things right. And Jake Paul, relatively speaking, has at least arrived there. So I would favor him over many other celebrity, even professional athlete level opponents. But yeah, going forward, we'll just take it case by case and analyze that when they present themselves. But those are my current thoughts on Jake Paul's, spectacular performance against Nate Robinson, and two, the outlook moving forward. As far as Nate Robinson, if he chooses to continue developing and learning how to box, I still think he's got the physical tools to do so. He's in his 30s now, so it's pretty late to pick up a lot of those fundamentals. He also has a lot of guts, obviously, a lot of spirit. He got up 2 times, and I know that it looked comical to many, but to really understand and then appreciate what goes into getting up from a bad knockdown. I mean, his head was under the rope and almost out of the ring, and he still was determined enough to make it up a second time and continue. Again, I don't think he beat the 10 count the first time, but it wasn't for lack of trying. So shout out to him for putting it on the line. It obviously came with its unfortunate consequences. But yeah, there's no shame in saying no thank you to wanting to keep on fighting and learning how to fight, like, at least on that level. If you're Nate Robinson, shit. I mean, Ron Artest just came out, Meta World Peace, said that he's good on this. Good luck to all future and current fighters, but I have no interest in fighting for charity or professionally or otherwise. No thank you. And Ron Artest is one of the NBA players who most would have thought, you don't want to mess with Ron Artest. He's very coordinated hands-wise. He's big as a mountain, and he could, and he's fast-handed, and he's tough, and he's mean. Like, there's a lot that made people kind of imagine what Ron Artest could be as a professional fighter. But Ron Artest said no thank you, and if he says no thank you, a lot of you people out there should also find solace in saying no thank you. It's really not for everybody. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on the fight and on Jake Paul's future in the sport, in the pseudo sport. It definitely has a niche. Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.